Thank you for all coming. There are a lot of familiar names, and it would have been wonderful to have been a chance to talk in person and talk about research. And I look forward to doing that in future. I'm also grateful that Eileen and Patrick were able to make it. They are, of course, not to be blamed for any of the failings of today, but obviously this wouldn't have been possible without this team. I've always been fortunate with great co-authors just throughout, and Eileen and Patrick are just amazing. So we started this project because the previous literature consistently found that female legislators were doing more work than male legislators. And, oh, I gotta actually get on my slides. Okay, there we go. And we want to know why. Why were women doing more? And the research suggests that women do more in several areas. They are more likely to speak during plenary sessions. They pass more bills. They also put more effort into their constituency service. Now, one of the proposed explanations for this pattern is that women face electoral discrimination, such that the only ones who get into office are of higher quality because they have what it takes to overcome the bias against them. However, the majority consensus seems to be that there probably isn't a great deal of discrimination. So this probably does not explain the differences between men and women in the legislature. While voters are not driving the observed gender pattern in this specific way, the three of us think that voters are important to understanding gender differences in work levels. In a general sense, voters matter because politicians want to please voters with the actions that they take. For this reason, politicians look to voters as they make decisions. We argue that the legislator-constituent relationship might matter in explaining the observed gender difference in work effort. So in this project, we argue that voters could be sending different signals to male and female legislators, and we look at two different signals they might send. The first relates to signals about party approval. Our lower approval for women hypothesis posits that women might be hearing more negative things from voters. While this hasn't been researched in political science, there is evidence from other fields that suggest this can happen. An example that relates to the people on this session is student reviews. Women systematically receive more negative feedback in their reviews. We look at positive versus negative signals about party approval, in part because of research design reasons, but also for theoretical reasons. Because party approval affects vote choice, politicians have strong incentives to respond to signals about their party. So when party approval is lower, politicians have incentives to work hard in order to win over those voters. And if women are hearing more negative things about their party, this might explain why they work harder than men to overcome that. The second signal that women legislators might receive deals with how much constituents expect them to do. The greater expectation for women hypothesis posits that women are asked to do more. If they're asked to do more, then efforts to be responsive to voters would lead them to do more. It is worth noting there are three reasons why women might be asked to do more. First, women might outreach to constituents in a way that leads to more requests. This might be simply that they're more likely to ask, or they're more effective in how they ask. Second, it could be that constituents are more likely to respond to women than they would to a man. Third, it could be that constituents respond, that when they respond, they ask women to do more than they ask a man to do. Now, we're interested in the constituent side of this equation. So the first of these three possibilities is a potential confounding variable. So one of the reasons we ran the field experiment was to hold outreach constant. In our experiment, the men and women are using the same outreach to reach a comparable set of voters, so this factor is not an issue. We are thus focusing on these other two factors, which deal with the demand that come from voters. Our field experiment's relatively straightforward. We partnered with 2 pairs of legislators. Each pair included 1 woman and 1 man. The legislators then sent letters asking constituents to take a survey to provide input on issues of the day. We randomized whether the female legislator sent the letter or whether the male legislator sent the letter. Of course, both partners were acting very responsibly in a COVID era, making sure that they were always wearing their masks. Now, let me provide you a few more details about our experimental protocol. First, we recruited pairs of legislators serving together in multi-member districts who were from the same party and were of the same race. In each pair, 1 legislator was a man and the other was a woman. Because they represent the same district, they are also representing the same set of voters. Now, second, we worked with the legislators to create letters, websites, and surveys that the voters saw. The letters, the websites, and the surveys all included the name of the legislator and their picture, which are strong indications of the legislator's gender. They were exposed to the name and picture several times to ensure that the gender of the legislator was very clear. Third, we used an enhanced voter file as our sampling frame, and the legislators sent letters to 30,000 registered voters. We randomized, of course, whether they received the invitation from their male representative or their female representative. To test the lower approval for women hypothesis, the survey to constituents included the question at the top of your screen. I'll pause for a minute so you can read it. We analyze whether the legislator's gender predicts constituents' response to the question, while we also control for the factors given at the bottom of the slide, which includes partisanship, indicators of past voting participation, and so forth. We found that there was no difference. Constituents were not more negative about the party when responding to men versus women. As for the controls, we found that partisanship worked as expected. Co-partisans gave higher approval ratings, and opposing partisans gave more negative approval ratings. To test the greater expectations for women hypothesis, the survey included this open-ended question. I'll pause again for a moment so you can read it. Just as a side note, it's worth emphasizing that the responses to this question were incredibly thoughtful and showed some real engagement from the voters. This is one advantage of doing it as a field experiment. They were responding not to us as academics, but to their representative. And it came through in how they responded. Now, to analyze these responses, what we did is we assigned an RA who was blind to the treatment to code a number of issues listed in each response. The RA did this by using the code book prepared for the Comparative Agendas project. They specifically had a code book that they had prepared for Pennsylvania, which worked perfect for us since we're also using the context of the US state. The analysis shows that legislators' gender predicts how much constituents ask the legislator to do. Consistent with the greater expectation hypothesis, women are asked to do more. Before talking about the main results here, I wanted to highlight some results from the controls, which we found interesting. We found that voters were more likely to donate, and those who voted in past elections were much more likely to make requests of their legislators. Here's a summary of those results. I want to focus on the last column. It gives the number of constituents you would need to contact to get one issue request. So if a legislator contacted 20 constituents who were non-donors, non-voters, they would receive one issue request. However, if they contacted 2 voters who were donors and frequently voted, they would receive one issue request. So it's a 10-to-1 ratio. So even when we hold constant the outreach from legislators, the people who donate and vote are the ones making more demands on their legislators. That was not the main point of our experiment, but given that we just thought this was an interesting finding that I wanted to highlight. Returning to the main point, the substantive significance of the main effect, we found that if legislators sent out 50 surveys to constituents, a female legislator would receive 8 requests, while a male legislator would receive only 7 requests. This means that women are receiving 14% more requests. That can add up. So this figure displays the potential workload gap as district size increases. The x-axis gives the population of the district, and the y-axis the predicted issue request in the circumstance where the legislator would outreach to all constituents in their district. The solid line is the predicted number of requests women would receive, and the dashed line the predicted number that men would receive. The points near that bottom, those are the state legislatures. That's the actual size of their average district in the US. In smaller districts, the workload difference is probably not noticeable. So as an example, the median state house district has about 40,000 people. If all constituents were contacted, we would expect a woman legislator to receive 800 more requests than a male legislator. However, that difference grows significantly. So if we look at one of the larger districts, like the Texas Senate, with roughly 800,000 people in it, in a district that size, we'd expect the female legislator to receive 16,000 more issue requests than her male counterpart. So this number is clearly exaggerated because not all the population is old enough to be contacted and to respond to a survey. But we're not actually interested in how people respond to survey requests. We use the survey as a means to learn about more general patterns of constituents' demands on legislators. The main point is that constituents are asking women to do 14% more work than their male colleagues. And in large districts, those requests can add up to a significant increase in absolute workload. One of the questions we asked after finding this was we were wondering which constituents are requesting more. On one hand, we thought women might be the ones asking more of women legislators because previous researchers have documented a role model effect where women become more politically active when they are represented by women. On the other hand, prior work has found that men are more likely to search out for information about female politicians. And certainly one way of kind of learning about one's representative is asking them to do stuff and finding out. In our experiment, we found that it was men who were driving the increased workload. Women gave the same number of issue requests to both male and female legislators. However, men sent 20% more issue requests to female legislators than they sent to male legislators. As I noted before, we found that those who are most active in politics, donors, frequent voters, were also the ones making the most requests of legislators. This was not the main point of the study, but certainly this is, again, yet another reason we might expect these types of constituents to be so influential on outcomes. As for the experiment, we found that women legislators are being asked to do more. They received 14% more issue requests, and a 14% increase in workload can really add up. Because women are asked to do more, it should not be completely surprising that they are in fact doing more. We also found that it was male constituents who were behind the increased demand on women. This is one finding that should be explored further by subsequent research. Thank you, and I look forward to thoughts and questions.